Good afternoon. Welcome. Reform UK leader Nigel Farage has torn into Sir Keir Starmer at Prime Minister's questions this afternoon as he's called for a national emergency into the Channel crisis.
10,000 young, undocumented males have illegally crossed the English Channel into our country, a 40% increase on this time last year, many coming from cultures that are somewhat alien to ours. They are being housed at a cost of many billions of pounds a year in hotels and increasingly in private rented homes. The effect on communities is one of a sense of deep unfairness, actually bordering on resentment. Is it not time to admit that Smash the Gangs was nothing more than an election slogan and not a policy? And isn't it time to declare a national emergency and to act accordingly?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we are passing a borders bill with extensive powers to smash the gangs. These are terrorist-like powers that give powers to the police to intercept where they think the suspects are committing people smuggling, which is a vile trade. We must take back control of our borders after the last government lost control.
And now it seems even Sir Keir Starmer's own MPs are turning on him as backbenchers urge the Prime Minister to consider leaving the European Convention of Human Rights, that is the ECHR, to get a grip of the Channel crossings. But first, let's speak to GB News' political correspondent, Katherine Forster, and also GB News' senior political commentator, Nigel Nelson. All right, Katherine, let's start with what was said at PMQs.
Yes, well, it's not very often that Nigel Farage gets a question, but luckily for him, with the local elections tomorrow, he did today. And I thought it was quite a bad-tempered exchange. I really felt that the sort of temperature changed. The Prime Minister is very used to responding to Kemi Badenoch. He sort of got the measure of her, but not so much Nigel Farage. And I felt that the Prime Minister really seemed a bit rattled to me in that his response was very cross and also very, very rushed. He got so many words out very, 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 very quickly. And I think it was difficult for him, but worth saying too, Kemi Badenoch, you might have thought that net zero would be the big topic in Prime Minister's questions today. Not a bit of it. Kemi Badenoch chose to talk entirely about the grooming gangs. I think we can have a little look at some of what she had to say.
Chaos and cover-ups with Labour councils. When will he show leadership and do the right thing?
The right thing to do is to invest in our criminal justice system so we can bring people to justice. They've absolutely collapsed the criminal justice system. Their record was abysmal. They should hang their heads in shame.
She also said, was the Prime Minister dragging his heels because of what might be uncovered in local councils? And I'm told that the reason that Kemi Badenoch decided to go on this is because, of course, we know that the grooming gangs have operated often in Labour-controlled areas, not just Labour-controlled areas, of course, I should say.
Yeah, it was a very interesting exchange. Nigel Nelson. Got you, Nigel Farage.
Yes.
You've changed.
That's changed my politics, rather.
Yes, what did you make of that?
Well, I mean, I think that Catherine's right, that certainly Keir Starmer seemed to be a bit bad-tempered, I thought, towards Nigel Farage. What was interesting about the question was that Nigel Farage is calling for a state of emergency. And what begs the question is, to do what? At the moment that you've got various things in place, now Nigel turned around and had a go at smashing the gangs as purely an election slogan. But it is happening. It's happening slowly. We're not going to see results. We probably won't see proper results for several years. If you turn the whole thing into an emergency, what do you do? What can you do more than you're doing? And of course, none of that came out at PMQs today.
Well, look, isn't it that if something is declared a state of emergency, there are other procedures that can be followed more quickly, or you can do things more rapidly, or you can use it as an excuse to then maybe kibosh some of the rules that make it difficult for you to deport people.
But I don't know which rules. I mean, we still have the same problem. I mean, if, say, for instance, an Afghan comes across on a boat, we want to send him back to Afghanistan, that is really difficult. The chances are that they would face death or torture if they got there. So the rules are still in place to stop things like that happening. So the question comes down to what kind of emergency?
Well, the emergency would be giving you more ability to leave the ECHR. And a lot of his own MPs now, Sir Keir Starmer's own MPs, are now discussing it, which was not really seen as something they would have entertained before.
Well, I mean, the ECHR, I think there probably does need to be some reform, especially of the family clauses within it. But that's a different thing. That is not something you can do as an emergency. You can't just suddenly...
Well, why not?
Well, suddenly pull out of the ECHR. We'd then be pulling out of international law.
Well, when you're in a state of emergency, sometimes you need to pull out of international law. This is one step forward for him if he does that, to declare a state of emergency and acknowledging the severity of the situation.
I was thinking more if we were doing something as an emergency thing, like turning back the boats back to France,
well,
yes, but it's already been shown that can't be done unless you're prepared to drown people in the English Channel, which is really difficult.
It's probably not difficult to drown people in the English Channel, but you probably wouldn't want to.
Well, you wouldn't. No, it's probably very easy for a destroyer to do that, but no, we wouldn't want to.
No.
Then, of course, you need to get the agreement of France to go and do it. And if you don't get the agreement of France, France could turn around and say, well, hang on, if you were to just dump your migrants as they see it back in Calais, we'll go and pile them on a boat and take them to Norfolk. So there are a whole host of reasons why you can't do it. What I want to hear from Reform is if we're going to have a state of emergency, what will it achieve?
Well, it would be interesting to hear what they have to say about the issue and whether that means that there's something extra. But it could be something that will allow them to turn back boats or do something that maybe they can bypass certain laws within the ECHR that they wouldn't have normally been able to do under these normal circumstances.
Yeah, well, I mean, I just don't see how any of those things are possible at the moment. This I think, is the real problem with immigration as a whole. A lot of people are against it. A lot of people want things done, and certainly everybody wants to see the boats stopped from crossing the Channel. Every time you look at what you might do, it falls apart. I mean, what Reform talk about is following the Australian system, but it's not comparable to anything that happens here. That there are no international waters between Dover and Calais, so it's very difficult to sort out where a border is. What the Australians did when they were turning boats back, they had 150 miles of international waters and bigger boats because they were crossing much bigger areas, so less chance of people drowning. And they also had the agreement of Indonesia to take these people back.
Yeah, well, we can, I think there's nothing wrong with trying to work towards a solution that is similar to one that has already succeeded. In fact, I'd say that's probably the most intelligent way of doing it. Right, Nigel, you're with me all afternoon. And Katherine Forster, thank you. Right, landlords. They have branded the government's policy of housing asylum seekers in private properties as immoral. Now, this comes as Serco, working closely alongside the Home Office, are offering property owners guaranteed rent for 5 years if they agree to house asylum seekers. Serco currently manages about 30,000 asylum seekers across 7,000 properties throughout the UK. But is this the right move? Well, joining me now is landlord Jeremy Leith. Is this the right move? What's wrong with them suggesting something that actually has been happening for many years, but actually now calling all landlords, which is the heading of the Serco's website?
Well, it's one of those stories and you hear about and you think, oh, well, that sounds quite a good idea. But when you actually drill down to it and you see what's involved, it looks like no one's really thought this through very well. Because plenty of landlords, A, feel it's a bit immoral, and there's other practical reasons for not doing it.
Right, Nigel, what do you think of this? Because a lot of people might say that actually you are providing a situation where you are dispersing migrants within the communities rather than having them in one space where they can sort of become a congealed mass of people who are probably not happy with things and then cause problems.
Well, I mean, it's a good idea. If people are going to be here, I think we ought to sort of distinguish between people who are coming across undocumented and people who have a legal right to be here. here. Obviously, what you don't want is to form ghettos or the pockets that you're talking about. So the idea of dispersing people around the place strikes me as a good idea. The big thing, obviously, is if you don't do this, where do you put them? They've got to go somewhere. Obviously, hotels are really expensive, £8 billion a year. It is cheaper if you can do it. You can do it in private properties.
All right. Well, Jeremy, this is the thing. The idea of the migrants actually being dispersed rather than contained in one sort of area, which then can cause a situation which the locals are not happy with. Surely, and the prospect that the landlords will actually get their rent guaranteed over 5 years, especially with the Renters' Rights Bill coming in, isn't that a good thing?
Well, I can see some people being attracted by it, but money isn't the only driver of persuading landlords to take on certain tenants. They'd rather have, and most of the landlords we deal with, or me myself, would rather have a good tenant than maximum rent, and sending a wrong signal to other tenants in a building, more wear and tear. I mean, the biggest problem is we're just not building enough houses or flats for people. And there's plenty of people on existing council house waiting lists who are not being housed. So how would they feel, and the communities generally, if other people are given priority?
Well, that is a valid point, and that is probably one of the big problems as well, because some landlords might see this as, oh, wow, this is music to my ears. So what I'm going to do is now get rid of my current tenants who are paying this wonderful rent, who've been doing it for many years, and then take on one of these Serco contracts where I can get almost maybe double what I was getting for 5 years. And if they do trash the place, then it's going to be fixed and paid for. Perfect.
Well, they don't work out. The instances we've seen or heard of or other examples just don't work in practice. You may get a little bit of more money short term, but sometimes these are not enforced properly. At the end of the agreement, you can't get the people out, or maybe more people are living in the property than you anticipate, so there's more wear and tear. So it's lose-lose rather than win-win.
You can't get people out. But if this is a government-backed contract, then you probably could. But I'm wondering the impact of the Renters' Rights Bill. OK, so if that comes into play, well, because obviously you take on one of these contracts and that is coming into play, the only way you're allowed to actually usurp your tenants is if you're selling the property. Will that particular, when it becomes an act, will that have an impact on this particular situation?
Well, we'll put it this way. On the one hand, the government is supposed to be ramping up the housing building targets, 370,000 a year, whatever. But on the other hand, they're not doing really very much to encourage investor landlords to stay in the sector and provide some of this accommodation for them. Because apart from the migrant problem, the population is said to increase rapidly over the next 10 years. I read recently about 6 million more people. And where will most of those people want to be housed? In the private rented sector.
Have you ever taken on one of these sort of contracts?
No.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be tempted, depending on the strings attached and whether it can be properly enforced, what sort of people are there. And I wouldn't feel comfortable about it in view of the other people. There's enough problems with local authorities trying to house the existing people. So taking on a whole new raft of new people would be even worse. And
what kind of effect would this have on the actual rental market in terms of rent prices?
Well, there's almost a two-tier, there's a two-tier system emerging in that the better properties, rents are going up. For cheaper properties, it's probably level or even going down because people just can't afford to meet some of the rents that are there because a lot of landlords are selling up. So it wouldn't really make a big difference from that point of view.
All right, Jeremy Leith, thank you very much. He is a landlord. 19 minutes after 3 o'clock, a Home Office spokesperson said these arrangements with private rented sector have been in place for years, including under the previous government. We have a statutory duty to support destitute asylum seekers who will not be able to pay for fees such as utilities and council tax. We are restoring order to the asylum system and cutting costs to taxpayers by reducing the number of people we are required to accommodate through a rapid increase in asylum decision-making and the removal of more than 24,000 people with no right to be in the UK. We also reached out to Serco for comment, but have had no response.